Hi, this is Peter Shampoo, latest in our Earth Ring series, an evolution that's been long in coming. I first discovered Earth rings with the observation of three mountains that generate an equilateral triangle that pointed to a town of Shelburne Falls, which, with study and evolving geometry and relationships of place and people, culture, and nature, it generated a great ring that defined the North American tectonic plate from the Azores over to California. I published a book on this treatise and study in 1999. Initial discovery was in 93, but it's been a lifelong love of the planet and Earth, stonemason for 25 years. I feel that the Earth has been my teacher more than any man. So I share with you my discoveries. These discoveries come out of the 90% that make up the dark matter and energy that has a gravitational signature, but it cannot be seen. It is the separate reality that is occasionally viewed, as in the case of Pablo Amaringo with his ayahuasca visions. This 90% can be found and perhaps accessed through the 90% of junk DNA and the 90% of our brain that's unused. The glial brain, the brain that operates on frequency. Now there is a 90% of life that makes up the biosphere, and that is water. Anything water touches informs it with its embedded geometry. Water and the angle at which hydrogen attaches to oxygen can be seen expressed in the interior of the human heart. And indeed, many sacred geometry is used by the ancients in their temple construction. We humans possess 12.5 billion miles of DNA. Stretched end to end, it would reach from the sun to the edge of its heliosphere. So we are beings of the solar system. There is part of us that is Mars, Jupiter, Mercury and Venus, Saturn, Neptune and Pluto. Let's not forget that electrical Uranus. Yes, we are the solar system. In this edition of Earth Rings, we'll be looking at the shampoo effect, ley lines, and latitudes with attitudes, which we see here in this graphic. Earth rings, by way of review, are the two-dimensional expressions of the cross-section of our Earth, whose mantle, inner core and outer core, are projected into the Earth's crust in the form of Earth energy vortexes, and flowers, and humans, and pyramids. And it was expressed by the ancients in the Aztec calendar and Stonehenge calendar stones. Earth rings can be seen expressed in the wild iris, in the iris of our eyes with which we look at this image. We are the Earth. This latest discovery involves the dimensions of these Earth rings. The dimensions of these Earth rings that I'm finding on planet surface match the dimensions of the inner core of the planet. And those same dimensions that we find, like the inner core and outer core of the Earth, approximately match the dimensions of both Mars and Pluto. And many of the outer planets also express Earth dimensions. The inner core of Jupiter, for instance, is the same size as the Earth. The stony core of Saturn is the same size as the Earth. And the core of Neptune is proportionate to the size of the Earth. So here we see the Earth, its cross-section, and planetary overlays. Venus, just a little bit smaller than the Earth, is at that point between the lithosphere and mantle boundaries, and when projected onto the surface, generates the 19.5 degree north latitude. That is the hot spot of our planet. Along there you'll find Hawaii, and Mexico City, and Mount Pinatubo, all volcanic outlets coming up from the deep mantle. This same latitude is expressed in other planets as well. This 19.5 degree latitude is where the hot spot of Jupiter is located. Incidentally, the hot spot is the same size as the Earth. So there's this conversation going on between the Earth and other planets, with us, and indeed the entire heliosphere. Here, this graphic representation of Earth rings around the planet show how rings like the dimensions that match the dimensions of Moon, the Mercury, and Mars all cohere as a kind of bubbling, a lathering, a shampoo effect, if you will, whose interpenetrating spheres, rings, almost look like a crowd of humans if you were to had eyes to see their light bodies. We also see the smaller rings of the Pluto or Earth inner core diameter rings. So here we have this cymatic effect. The Aboriginal didgeridoo has a cymatic pattern that matches the Earth rings. This sound that permeates space, that permeates our heliosphere, is perhaps the sound of creation, the sound of Creator, informing all matter, how to be, how to live, how to interact. It's the same biology, it's the same pattern from atom out to galaxy. Perhaps Pluto is a protoplanet. If drawn to the sun, it would become a planet itself, growing into a Mercury, and then into a Venus, and then into an Earth, maintaining its stony inner core. After all, it is an expanding, growing universe. The inner core ring is quite prevalent along the Beijing Lei, going through Bangkok, Thailand, Beijing, China, through the center of China, along the coast of Russia, Bering Strait, Grand Tetons, over through Palenque and down into South America, through the Nazca Plains. An example of one such inner core Earth rings is that made by the Arc of Japan, centered at the river boundary between China and North Korea and Russia. This radius stretches out to Mount Fuji and makes this great 1,400-mile arc of the inner core of Pluto. On the left, we see the 38th parallel, the DMZ between the Koreas, that nuclear trigger, and how the Earth responded to this nuclear tension in the destruction of the Fukushima nuclear plant in Sendai, Japan, along the same parallel. Our consciousness, our intentions, our fears are all manifest by the planet. And the planet supports us with these earth rings. And we too can support the planet with our own earth ring. China's Three Gorges Dam, now inundating its center earth ring, marked by Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Hanoi, was once the White Emperor City, the island of poets. It was from this island, this beautiful, inspirational place, now being inundated by the Three Gorges Dam, is where the poets of China, the great poets of China, defined the Chinese character and people. Other earth rings can be seen in the Arc of Jakarta and Sumatra, this the size of Mercury, and centered on Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, a great volcano. Another earth ring we see in Europe, centered on a man-made volcano called Chernobyl. This Mercury arc is defined by the boot of Italy in the north coast of Scandinavia. Another earth ring, the 360-mile diameter earth core crystal, is expressed in the Gaia matrix, that energetic point at the center of the North American tectonic plate, from which the culture that has become North America has expanded from. It is from here a new culture is emerging, a new worldview is emerging. That of a circle, that the earth is a circle, not a box, not a square, not a line, but many, many circles spanning the earth, north, south, east, west, above and below. Here this shampoo effect is seen bubbling across the North American plate, in moon rings, in Mars rings, inner and outer core rings. People, place, and purpose. Body, soul, mind, earth, stars, water, pentagon, heptagon, hexagon. We, the people of the earth, have a purpose. We hold space in the seven sacred directions, north, south, east, west, above and below. Expressions of the planet spinning. We are vortexes, as the planet is a spinning vortex. We, an expression of the perfect harmony of nature, choose in our free will to go in the opposite direction. Perhaps it's time to embrace our purpose here on earth and bring harmony to the elements. In our walk, in the places we live, we generate geometries. Here, an example of the geometry that my wife and I make, and the position of her families relative to us in our homes. Yes, we are water. Anytime water touches the earth, it generates geometry. So the purpose of a place like Shelburne Falls, the center of the North American tectonic plate, might be considered to be bringing balance to the world, as it is the center point between a yin and yang, between water and land. This place in the mists where native peoples once came to fish for salmon was a place of peace, and anyone could come and go for a day's travel from this point without fear of theft or molestation, because it was a collective resource that was shared by all. And here, this place of peace, this bridge of flowers across the river, is really a divide between old North America and new North America. East of here we have the granites of the expanding, evolving planet, whose mid-Atlantic rift was once here in New England, is now out in the mid-Atlantic, expanding and growing. The place, and the purpose of the Great Lakes is to bring life to the world, to generate the Gulf streams, to generate the jet streams. Its great water surface brings the snows and waters to New England. Its iron and coal, its copper, has brought peoples to its shoals for millennia. Tools that bring life to us all. Geography, it's the synthesis of the geosciences into a pattern expression of people, place, and purpose. New Orleans, every Fat Tuesday, dance along Bourbon Street, on plane with ley lines, in relationship and context to the great river Mississippi, whose headwaters is marked by Lake Itasca in Minnesota. This radius is the same as that of the moon. So the watery moon, the moon that governs our tides, often it also informs the dimension of the Mississippi River Basin. We see Native American sites arrayed around this basin, marking a geometry of water. Ley lines might be considered the meridians, the DNA, the memory fields of our planet, named after the garlands received in Hawaii in honor of the goddess Pele, whose volcanoes often mark these ley passages. The term ley first came from England, very distinctive megalithic pattern of place and people and geography all in a line. Memory lines, if you will, cultivated, recognized, and honored, whether consciously or unconsciously, as human biology, who just are drawn like bees to a flower. These flowering ley lines can also be burned up, as in the case of Jerusalem, Baghdad, in the flowering of Islamabad, Lhasa, and Hong Kong, all turn to the dark expression of human nature. There's some healing that can happen along this line. New memories need to be shared. New memories of love need to be shared between the peoples of this line. No more war. The Akkadian ley and the Arcadian ley, both the same line, the great Ouroboros line, the Earth line, if you will, the equatorial line, stretching from Mexico City over into Yemen. This ley courses through New Orleans, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., New York City, Boston, Dublin, London, Franco-German border, Kosovo, ancient Troy, and Haifa, Israel. These two are earth rings. Here, a telluric, a north-south line coursing through New Hampshire, is an aeromagnetic expression that is telluric in nature, that is bioelectric. It is shown here in magenta as the magnetic anomalies generated by magnetite in the White Mountain granite. This combination of nature and culture is further reinforced with the positioning of places like Newport Tower, Mystery Hill, New Hampshire, the Westford Night in Massachusetts, and the Mystery Egg of Ossipee, all placed along this telluric line of magnetite through New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. The Westford Night is a map of this great ley, this telluric energy. Its sword pointing back to Nova Scotia colony in Scotland, the originating point of the peoples who constructed these edifices. These latitudes with attitudes and longitudes, nice play with words, are expressed in the 19.5, which is a fire line, the hot spots, the volcanic outlets, and the water lines where all the rivers dump into the oceans, Colorado, Mississippi, Nile, Yangtze, all dump onto the 30th parallel. And indeed the Ganges, its headwaters are on the 30th parallel. So fire or water and air would be the 42nd parallel, where the jet stream serpents along, bringing the fertilizing rains and changing seasons that has spawned empires. And perhaps the 50th parallel is the parallel of ether, where we find Stonehenge. And the parallel of Earth would be that of the equator, marking the full circumference of the Earth. These are all Earth lines. These are latitudes with attitudes. A man-made latitude with attitude is the 3630 parallel, the slave latitude, marked by the Missouri Compromise to divide North and South, slave and non-slave. It's along this parallel that the Trail of Tears was walked, where thousands of native peoples died in their forced exodus from the southeast of North America to the Oklahoma territories. This bloodshot eye frames the New Madrid Fault. This fault is thought to be dividing the geologies of North America, east and west. Eventually this fault will tear the country apart, and there'll be an inland seaway running from Quebec City down to New Orleans. But you see, this is a mark of karma in the land that still afflicts the soul of America. So to heal these karmic scars, these memories, we can use earth rings to bring peace to the land, to bring harmony and balance between the leaders of the South, memorialized in Stone Mountain, Georgia, outside Atlanta, and the leaders memorialized in Washington, D.C. Healing the warrior, healing the slave, the memory of the slave, and the pain of the American peoples, whose great sacrifice allowed this country to become what it is today. The 72nd meridian has many interesting sites. Yale University is on this meridian, and it is here where the Machu Picchu artifacts were stored, supporting the king-making of Yale University. A military-industrial meridian of power rooted in the Buffalo Horn Butte, Devil's Tower to the north, and the Nika crystals of Chihuahua, New Mexico, in the Zone of Silence to the south. This front range of the Rocky Mountains is spotted with volcanic vents and anomalous activities. Geometries of place is another expression of earth rings. Here we see Boston, whose bays and estuaries cohere to a suggestion of a hexagon, and whose core structure was infilled to generate a hexagon. And indeed, even civic buildings like City Hall and the police department and fire departments also cohere to the same hexagonal form, just out of course of water interfacing with land, with humans co-creating with earth. Montreal is central to another such water geometry, this one a seven-pointed star. In Africa's water geometry, the pentagon shows how the center lines of the pent spears emerge from Mecca and Rome, suggesting that these two great religions are fighting over the heart of Africa, and the suffering of Darfur is the result. This five-point geometry was generated by the placement of the Great Pyramid in the volcanic zones of Africa. Geometry of place can be found in scale from the Great Lakes to a region to a town itself. Here, the town of Greenfield, Massachusetts. My present residence is marked by confluences of rivers and roads, green fields and recreation areas, golf courses and sanctuaries. Yes, Gaia Matrix has been evolving for many years now. In this center point of North America is where a new worldview is emerging. A worldview, that of a circle, of an eye, of an iris, of a human that is part of a heliosphere, that's part of a greater community, that must come in harmony with itself and its relationship with the planet. We must get outside of our boxes and experience the world as a round, interconnected place. Just as we are as humans, a round and interconnected place. So thank you for spending your time to listen to this newest expression of earth rings, these new discoveries in this evolving science of gaiography. You can view these images and much more on geometryofplace.com/gaiography101.html. I am grateful for the laughing waters. Until next time, this is Peter Shampoo bidding you adieu.